Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Forced Fandom, a show where one person tries to force another to like a thing that they love. I am here with Emily Bamforth, who is making me watch Gilmore Girls this season. And this week, we watched Season 2, Episode 19, Teach Me Tonight. So, Emily, could you explain why you chose this honestly kind of strange episode?
Yeah, I can. A quick reminder to all our listeners that we are now living in a post-Gilmore Girls revival world.
We really are.
We really are. There are think pieces everywhere.
And a lot of really upset Facebook statuses.
There really are. I am personally not upset. I felt it was a rather fitting sequel or follow-up, whatever you want to call it. And I'll be glad to discuss this with people who actually know what's going on.
Which is not me.
Yeah, Taylor, I messaged Taylor today and I was like, should we do something about the revival? And he's like, and I'm like, this won't work, will it? And he's like, no.
I'm still in season 2.
Yeah, we're still in season 2. Last time we saw a Tisket a Tasket where some of the tension rises between Dean and Jess, but we don't actually see a lot of Dean in this because Dean is away. I chose this episode because it is one of the crucial Jess episodes, and it is also something that is a very clear departure from what Taylor's watched in the past, and that is this isn't excessively kitschy. It's more of an actual episode that reminds you that you're watching kind of a teen drama in the 2000s. So let's get started. There's a lot of good stuff in here, including a great movie by Kirk.
This week's snappy dialogue intro sequence was all about Marty, the sub-in bag boy at the grocery store, who is subbing for Dean while he's mysteriously away at his grandmother's house. This was the moment where I knew exactly how this episode was going to go. As soon as they said, oh, Dean's at his grandma's house, I was like, welp. This is the part where we start phasing characters out because we're bored with them and phase new characters in, aka Jess.
AKA, they saw that their ratings probably spiked since they introduced Jess.
Yeah, and they probably did, and with good reason. Jess is a much more interesting character than Dean, who we previously referred to as a paper towel of a person.
My mother likes to refer to him as everyone's first boyfriend, which is a fairly good way to describe him. But
yeah, I agree.
In any case, so in the meantime, while Dean is away, I'm wondering whether the actor who played Dean actually had something to do that week.
My guess is, that he's probably working on another project. That's usually how these things go.
Jared Padalecki then went on after Gilmore Girls to star in Supernatural. In case anybody was wondering, / Taylor, in case you were wondering.
I actually did not know that's who that was. He looks totally different now.
He grew up good. He no longer looks like I can threaten you, but I actually can't punch you. Now he looks like I won't threaten you, but I can actually punch you. And also, he kills a lot of spooky stuff. That's
spooky, scary stuff. That's right.
Spoopy stuff. So it's movie in the square night coming up, and we get some classic Taylor v. Lorelai dialogue. Taylor he has a weird title, but I always think of him as the mayor, but he's kind of everything in the town, which if it was a real small town, there would be some kind of charter prohibiting him from doing what he's doing. But there isn't. So Taylor does everything, including coordinating movie in the square night. And Lorelai, being a movie buff herself, is like, nah, we can't watch The Yearling again, which makes me crack up every time, but that's not the point. So now Lorelai is in a position where she gets to choose the movie, but the problem is it stars Hollow, which is a snow globe of the 1950s.
Yeah, and so let's just get this whole plot line out of the way real quick. Lorelai is having trouble because she wants to pick a movie and she's having a hard time, and there are so many things that she wants to pick, and oh no, all this is so hard. And then after 2 whole days, Taylor comes by and gives her the binder of approved movies that they can get for free, as if she didn't need that in the first place or anything. And then she goes through the whole binder and finally decides that the only one worth anything is The Yearling. The only good thing to come out of this whole joke thread is when they're reading all of the movie log lines at Luke's, and they're all just completely ridiculous. They're like, a teenage couple fights off zombies. decent kiss scene.
Which is basically Netflix descriptions now. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but it's literally how Netflix episode descriptions are.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, in other Lorelai news, Chris and Lorelai are fighting at the beginning of this episode, and for the life of me, I actually can't remember what they're fighting about. I think it's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, people who are listening, because I've watched a lot of Gilmore Girls this week, but I think it's because Chris and Sherry are together now. Sherry is Chris's new girlfriend.
Oh, yeah. They make a lot of references to Sherry in this episode. That's what I assumed it was, too.
Yeah, so Sherry's Chris's new girlfriend. She's blonde and perfect and whatever. And as soon as Chris comes in and his, like, Chris used to be kind of on a motorcycle, still kind of lost in his 30s kind of guy. And now he drives, like, a really, like, nice car and has a good job and, like, has kind of, like, grown up a whole bunch. And Lorelai was like, oh, yeah, this looks great. Like, maybe I'll get back into this. And then he's like, yeah, I'm living with someone. And she's like, ah! But then she has this whole bit. And I would advise you, Taylor, to go look at this bit because it's actually pretty good. But she has this whole bit where she talks about how she's, like, glad he's grown up because now she can move on. And, like, she was waiting around because she was like, oh, yeah, it'll be him and me eventually whenever he, like, gets there. But no, he's off the market, basically. And then Chris gets really mad and, like, GTFOs. As far as I know, that is what has happened before this happened. So Chris and Lorelai, who normally get along fairly well, like, either Chris is absent or they're getting along pretty well, they're fighting. And that's not good. So you haven't seen a lot of Christopher, have you?
Only vague moments where Rory's on the phone with him.
Yeah, Chris is, he's something else. He becomes more prominent in the later series, but you see him pop in and out during the first two. I didn't make you watch Rory's debutante ball because if you see Rory dancing one more time, I think that you're going to throw this whole thing in the trash. In any case, let's forget about that drama and move on to different drama, which is Jess is a bad boy who doesn't study.
Yeah, Lane's trying to take a test, and Jess comes in late, and he doesn't have a pencil, and he doesn't have any paper, and he's an asshole, and then that scene kind of abruptly ends, and Luke's in the principal's office, and he's explaining that, you know, he just doesn't really have time to discipline Jess or whatever, and he's not his real dad, and all this stuff, and the principal's like, well, if you don't do anything about this, he's gonna get held back. And that seems to be, like, the motivator for Luke, because now he's realized that, like, he's mildly responsible for Jess, and that Jess is probably not going to make it through high school if he doesn't, like, get himself together. And also Jess is stealing all the baseballs.
Such a freaking Jess move. Like, why would you even do that? That's just being an asshole for no apparent reason. And also, my favorite thing is that he marks up a copy of, like, Slaughterhouse-5.
Yeah, as if that's doing real homework.
And I'm like, dude, like, you couldn't pick something that isn't Vonnegut. Like, come on.
For real. Yeah, this episode had a lot of, like, good Jess book references, like the scene where he tells Rory that she should read Please Kill Me, The Oral History of Punk Rock, which is the most Jess book to read. Like, I have a copy of it on the shelf behind me, and I was looking at it the other night as I was, like, packing up because I'm moving to a different apartment, and I was like, man, this is, like, a bad boy teenager book.
Did you also write notes in the margins?
I did not write notes in the margins, no. I read it in college, so.
How do you feel about notes in the margins? Jess and Rory are very big on notes in the margins.
So here's the thing. I am not a big notes in the margins person, but a couple of my dear friends are big note in the margin people, and so when I borrow their books, they always have notes in them, and I kind of love reading their notes, but I never feel like I have good enough ideas to write notes in the margins.
Kind of a Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince kind of deal?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, this is useful, but I can't really contribute to this.
Which is kind of how Luke feels about parenting. He is so bad at this.
He is very new at this. He's never had to do this.
So bad.
It was kind of sprung on him. Like, he doesn't really, like, he got a teenager. Like, he didn't even get, like, training wheels.
And not an easy teenager either.
Oh, no. Not like a Rory. He didn't get another Rory. Luke is going to try and parent, and that means making brownies. And going over to Rory and asking, hey, Rory, could you tutor the boy that you have weird sexual tension with?
And the only thing weirder about that conversation is the fact that Lorelai is in the next room and somehow doesn't barge in and stop all of this from happening. She waits politely until it's over and then argues with Luke in the front yard in full view of the whole town.
Yep. Because Lorelai is having a bit of a moment in this episode.
She's having more than a moment. She's having like the worst day ever.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. She's like bickering with her best friend, basically,
She's
and
got issues
like,
with her ex, and then
and
there's this whole
well,
Rory mess.
yeah, the whole Rory mess. And she's like, "Hey, guy that I have weird sexual tension with, please don't ask my daughter to tutor the boy that she has weird sexual tension with."
Who is actually related to you?
Ba ba da ba ba da ba ba. Uh, anyhow, yeah, it's very weird. Like the whole dynamic is very weird. So Rory is like, sure, because she's nice, I guess. This is actually somebody messaging me about Gilmore Girls, in case you're wondering what this sound is.
Nice.
Like that was a revival Gilmore Girls Facebook message interrupting the conversation I'm having about Gilmore Girls, which is literally my week. So both of them kind of agree, like, he's really smart, but he just doesn't apply himself. And
so
then,
apparently it's Rory's job to get him to apply himself? There are so many flaws in this logic, because Jess is obviously attracted to Rory, and so the solution to him not applying himself in school is to send a pretty girl over to hang out with him unsupervised under the guise of studying. Yeah.
Yep.
They're going to be doing a whole lot of studying.
Sure, and you see that coming too.
Oh, I saw that coming from a mile away. But before we get there, Lorelai is lingering at the diner and trying not to make this happen because she could see it coming too, because she was a bad girl in high school. And right before Jess gets there, Kirk comes by and asks if he can have a minute of Lorelai's time. And Lorelai says, "You can have 2 minutes because you're scary." And I thought that was just the most perfect Kirk moment until I got to the end of this episode, which is the most perfect Kirk moment.
Are you thrilled?
I am so thrilled. Let's get to it when we get to it, though, because before that, we have to get to tutoring, which is generally a disaster until they decide to go get ice cream. In case you were wondering, ice cream is not one of the subjects that Jess is failing in school.
It's probably doing quite well in ice cream. And this is after Rory asks Lorelai to lie for her. Like, actually asks her mother to lie for her to her boyfriend, which is like, let's not put my mom in the middle of this. And then she promptly puts her mom in the middle of it.
Especially because in the last episode that you and I watched, Rory got mad at her mom for being in the middle of her relationship with her boyfriend.
Yep. And then, once again, puts him in her in the middle of the relationship.
This whole show is really just about, like, unhealthy parenting.
It is kind of, because I never really thought about it, but the relationship here is not great. Like, it's not a very healthy relationship at all. There's a lot of lying and a lot of, like, passive aggression, and there's a lot of, like, no boundaries. There's, like, no boundaries.
Which is basically how Lorelai's relationship with Emily was, and also how Luke's relationship with Jess is.
I don't remember, honestly, if there's a healthy parent-child relationship in the show.
Well, it's certainly not Lane and Mrs. Kim.
That is for sure. Yeah, basically. Which, like, seriously, I am beginning to think, like, everybody's like, why does everyone forget about Lane? And I'm like, because she's, like, so forgettable in this frickin' show. Anyway.
Yeah, she's in this episode for all of, like, 2 minutes. And the only reason I have her name in my notes is because she's in the first scene that Jess is in.
Yeah. So we get to tutoring, and he, like, tries to do magic tricks and, like, stares at her while they study and, like, all this stuff. And there's a lot of GIFs on the internet of him staring at her while she studies, because apparently that's romantic.
I disagree wholeheartedly with that statement.
That's a kind of Twilight reasoning. But he makes a deal. They're going to get ice cream, as you said. And Rory tells Jess to drive her car, because that seems like a great idea, while she reads him stuff.
Yeah, she's going to read him Othello.
Which, that's not romantic. This is completely platonic.
So they get in the car and they go get ice cream, and ice cream is so much better out of a cone. So Jess says we can go back to Luke's if we just go straight, or we can turn right. And then they stare into each other's eyes and linger, and I was like, here's where it happens. This is where they get in the car wreck. And then Rory says, let's turn right, and then it fades to black, and I was like, oh, I guess the car wreck happens during the commercial break. And sure enough, when we come back from the commercial break, Rory's in the hospital. Like, as soon as she handed him the keys, I was like, well, This is the quintessential teenagers get into car wrecks episode.
Yeah, they share a lot in the car though, which I think is sweet.
Yeah, it's a cute scene where Rory explains that she's going to be an international journalist and he doesn't think she can handle it, and then she gets mad at him, and then she gets over it because he has cute dreamy eyes, and he explains that he doesn't think that he's ever going to amount to anything, and he's just going to go live wherever and do whatever and live in a van down by the river. And yeah, okay, like it was fine. But the whole time they're like staring intently into each other's eyes, and I wanted so badly for the car wreck to happen while they were doing that, because he wasn't even looking at the damn road.
Taylor, tell me that, like, that... Never mind. Because I was going to say, like, have you ever stared into somebody's eyes so long that you got into a car accident? Because apparently it happens to all teenagers. But I'm sure that's not true.
That's absolutely not true. That has happened to literally no one ever.
Well, Jess, no.
No, he swerved to not hit a possum or a deer or something. Which also, how is a girl so smart unable to tell the difference between a possum and a deer?
You missed the episode where Rory hit a deer. Or rather, the deer hit her. There was this whole bit, like, early in the children years where she stopped at a light and a deer hits her and it becomes this whole thing. It's ridiculous. So Rory has a bad history of cars and wildlife, but she's okay. She has a fracture in her arm and will need a cast because obviously Rory cannot get seriously injured.
Of course not.
Because that will distress everybody watching the show. Because Rory is a perfect little porcelain doll, apparently.
So I want to talk about this part, because this is a part that I was frustrated with, in a way, but then it ended up okay. And I think it just speaks to the show and, like, kind of the nuances of it. So they take Rory to X-ray, and Lorelai goes out into the lobby, looking for coffee, of course. And I could have sworn that Jess was going to be in that lobby, and they were going to fight. Like, they were going to scream at each other in the lobby. And then he was going to run away. Instead, she goes to Luke's and finds Luke and is looking for Jess, and that's how they realize that Jess has ran away. Like, I knew all along that Jess was going to disappear somewhere and they were going to find him in the woods and have a heart-to-heart, but I really expected Lorelai to get some closure out of this situation, and it's so interesting to me that the show doesn't let her do that. Like, if anything, the situation is made worse by that, because then she gets into an argument with Luke, who then gets mad at her because he doesn't even know where Jess is. And that, I thought, was a really powerful moment that a lesser show wouldn't have gone for.
No, I agree. And it's something where you honestly, like, you learn a lot more about Luke. Because before, like, he just was the guy that she gave, like, lingering glances to over her coffee cup, right? Like, that was it. Like, they're best friends. They talk about everything. But now Luke's in this very new position, and she doesn't even think of him as a parent. Like, she just thinks of him as, like, not even having anything to do with this kid, to be honest. And he's like, wait a second, I'm right now a parent and I have to go make sure my kid is okay. And I think that is really interesting, and I'm glad you enjoyed that, because honestly, seeing this made... because a lot of people did want Luke and Lorelai to be together at that point, and it adds a little bit more to that relationship. Like, it's not like a perfect hunky-dory relationship, right? So Luke goes on... And, I love Luke, too, because he loves Rory so much. Like, he loves, like, he and Lorelai are best friends, but, like, he treats Rory like his kid. And it's so cute, and it's so great, and I love Luke for that. I love Luke in this episode. Lorelai sees that the car got kind of wrecked, which you... probably didn't know this at the time, but Dean built her that car.
I did not know that.
So Dean...
So it's the symbolic end of her relationship with Dean.
Dean surprised Rory with that car on their anniversary. He built her, like, that entire car, and said, I love you for the first time, like, in that car. And Jess wrecked it, so that's
symbolism.
Amy Sherman-Palladino, I'm not sure she wrote this episode. I'm sure one of the Palladinos did, but she really hits you over the head with her symbolism.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, she does. Luke finds Jess at the bridge where he and Rory ate the basket and all that jazz, and they have this very gruff exchange.
In the sense that Jess says, I made sure she was okay, and then it fades to black.
Yeah.
That's all you get.
Well, you get that Luke knows that he cares about her. Like, you get that, like, Luke doesn't scream at Jess, right? And Luke is prone to scream at Jess.
Yeah. This was just so-so for me.
Well, you're not too invested in Jess as a character.
I'm really not.
Like, you're not a big fan, and that's fine. So Lorelai calls Christopher, and they're like parent things, and she wakes up and finds Christopher with her in Rory's room asleep, and then they talk,
which
and
wasn't
like,
creepy at all.
No, not at all. And they go out to talk, and they're like parenting, and then they like work through it together. Both want to kill Jess, and they apologize to each other for their fight. So things are good.
And this is where I expected the episode to end, with the resolution of Lorelai and Chris. And I'm glad that we get this final scene on the square, so that we can really just kind of end on a lighthearted note, ish. So we come back from commercial on Rory and Lane walking to the movie. And Lane makes some stupid sarcastic comment that nobody cares about because it's Lane. And Rory says, sarcasm doesn't become you. And Lane says, but it does sustain me, which I thought could basically be the motto of this show in a nutshell.
We need that on mugs.
I agree.
It's probably trademarked.
Probably. So then we watch Kurt's short film.
A film by Kirk! One of the iconic moments.
A film by Kirk. Oh man, it sure is a film. A film, as some might say.
It's so good!
In the sense that it's so bad.
I love it so much. It's so Kirk. It's so Stars Hollow. It's so amazing. It makes me so happy every single time I watch this scene. And so Chris can't stay because Chris is grown up now. And Jess is gone.
You said that wrong. Let me help you with that.
How did I say that wrong?
Did you hear, doll? Jess is gone. Jess is gone, doll. He's gone. Who is that woman?
Babette impersonation ever.
Who is that woman, and why is she not on this show all the time?
This is Babette. And you see Babette a lot more. Babette is actually Lorelai's next door neighbor. And there's this very weird episode in the beginning, which is called The Donna Reed Show. And Rory is like house sitting for Babette and her husband, whose name really escapes me. But he's like this very cool like jazz guy. And she's house sitting, and Dean comes over and it's a big thing. Babette's amazing. Babette and you, have you met Miss Patty? I feel you've met Miss Patty. They're best friends.
Well, obviously.
Yeah, so they're the town gossips, are Babette and Miss Patty. And every time Babette and Miss Patty and / Miss Patty come on the screen, that's the scene. Like it was great. I love her. I love her so much. But yes, I was like, how did I say this wrong? Because Luke has sent Jess home on a bus, and Jess wanted to go, and Lorelai is like, oh, okay, and then Rory is sad. Rory is sad, but still has not told Dean because
Dean's at his grandma's house, because the episode's not over,
because Dean is a paper towel of a person and does not know how to use a phone. So yeah, and that's how it ends. Jess is gone. How do you feel?
I feel like he's gonna come back.
Well, if this was the early 2000s, I could tell you wait till next week, but...
I mean, I feel like anybody watching this could tell he was going to come back.
Yeah.
Partially because he's so important, but also because his name is in the freaking credits now.
You know how easy it is to take things in and out of credits?
Well, yeah, obviously, because Dean was in the credits in the last episode we watched, and now he's mysteriously not anymore.
Well, he's at his grandma's house.
That's like saying that you sent the dogs to a farm upstate. We all know how that goes.
Aw, poor Dean. I hope he absorbs this information well. Okay, So this is a different type of episode than I've given you in the past. And it was kind of one that I gave you off the cuff, to be honest, because I was like, we can't let him get to the dance marathon episode yet because that's too much kitsch in a row. But I think this is a very important episode, and one that is a lot different. And so, how do you feel about it?
It was interesting. It was one that I never felt like it didn't feel like a chore to watch or anything. Like I did think numerous times, I can't believe this isn't over. But it wasn't because like it felt long. It was just because there were so many parts where it like faked you out and thought that it was going to end, and then it didn't. And I kind of liked
Commercial
that.
breaks.
Well, yeah, but the commercial breaks were written in a way that they could have been a cliffhanger.
Right.
And I liked that. It felt a little more interesting than some of the kitschier episodes that tend to move slower and don't have as many twists to them.
Right, which is also kind of a reason I wanted to give this to you because this is actually a type of episode that pops up pretty often. It's not the iconic episode, right? Like there's no iconic episode that probably has a whole bunch of weight to it in this series. Like it's not the dance marathon episode and it's not the basket episode. The kitschy stuff really does grab the attention, but it's the episodes like this that really make those kitschy episodes work, in my opinion.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because if you watch this straight through, you would get a pretty good balance of these two things.
Yeah, this helped because, like you said, I was getting a little kitsched out after the basket exchange. This was kind of a breath of fresh air for me.
That's good. I am very glad. So going into next time, you are going to be going back to kitsch.
So I've heard.
And this is, if you've noticed, in every single time I've asked people for an episode, they've brought this one up. And it is the famous Stars Hollow Dance Marathon. Are you excited?
Sure.
More dancing.
Eh.
That's okay. If you get too happy when you're watching it or too kitsched out, go watch a film by Kirk. That'll help.
It will help.
All right. So, if they want to hear your thoughts on a film by Kirk, the upcoming Dance Marathon episode, where should they find you?
For all of your esoteric short film criticism, you can find me on Twitter at TC Olmstead. And Emily, if they want to discuss the last 4 words with you, where should they do that?
They should talk to me at Emily M. Bamforth on Twitter. But watch out for spoilers. It's 6 hours of content, and not everybody has had a chance to watch it yet.
I certainly haven't.